to the Institute of Product Leadership, to the Product Leaders webinar on scaling high growth organizations. Today we are very excited to present a talk by Asif Iqbal, the Vice President of Product Management and Software Engineering at Sunrun. A note about the Institute before we get started. IPL, as we are popularly known, is a global business school for technology and product innovators based out of Bangalore, although we do have other campus locations coming up, both here in India as well as in the US. We run programs ranging from a full-fledged executive MBA program to 3-day workshops, all to build product innovators and leaders. Our corporate alumni range the who's who of corporations both in India and abroad, and we are over 1,000 alumni proud now, working across 220 companies. A note also about our recent foray into e-learning. Our first e-learning course, Product Management Fundamentals, is up on our e-learning site right now, as well as on Udemy. I have a special note for webinar attendees tonight. We are giving out a few discount coupons to attendees who post questions to Asif on our LinkedIn group, the Product Leaders Consortium. This is our LinkedIn group, Product Leaders Consortium. There's a very clunky URL, but that's the way I guess you register. So do register to our group, do become a member, interact with other product leaders. One lucky attendee to the webinar tonight will also get this book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, recommended by our speaker. It's about building a business when there are no easy answers, by Ben Horowitz. There are 3 great ways to ask questions of the speaker. You can, of course, like I already mentioned, post in our LinkedIn group. You can also type your questions in the chat window provided on the GoToWebinar platform and tweet to our handle @ProdLeader or with the hashtag ProdEvents on Twitter. I'd now like to request Professor Rahul, our Director of Faculty and Programs, to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thanks, Padmaja. And hey, welcome everyone. We're very excited to host Asif Iqbal, VP of Product Management at Sunrun, and really looking forward to this exciting webinar, this topic. This regular series of webinars that we've been doing, product leaders webinars as we call them, our endeavor here is to really bring senior executives from Silicon Valley, India, to share their insights, share their experience, leading products in startups as well as large companies, and really learn from people who do. And that's one of the principal tenets of our curriculum, pedagogy, and the learning experience that we have at the Institute. Learning from people who do and learning by doing. So again, very excited to host Asif Iqbal here today. As Padmaja mentioned, Asif is a veteran product management and engineering leader. He currently leads the product efforts and initiatives and innovation at Sunrun. Sunrun is the largest dedicated residential solar company in the US. Prior to that, he's had many senior executive roles in the United States as well as in Europe, and he is an entrepreneur at heart. Started his entrepreneurial journey at the age of 11. So, someone who really understands what it means to start up, but not just that, what does it mean to scale up? And that's equally important when we are talking about taking new innovations and ideas to market. So without further ado, Asif, warm welcome. Thanks for accepting our invitation to speak and share your insights and experience with the community here, and really look forward to your webinar. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Rahul. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And particularly when I learned about IPL, it was something that felt very close to heart. Even in B schools around here, the product management discipline is not something that is taught very well. I mean, it's new. I mean, it's up and coming. So it was very nice to kind of run into an organization and an academic institution that is dedicated to the discipline of product management, because it's a very exciting function and a very important function in the organization, as we're seeing in startups and in companies at scale. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Good morning from San Francisco. And I am here right in our office in downtown Market Street. The picture you see is actually right from our office. And it's exciting to get started. Rahul already covered an intro about me, so I'll just keep this short. I lead, as Rahul mentioned, the product management and software engineering function at Sunrun. I joined the company when it was about 250 people. So my role has been really, as a leadership team member, scale this business, scale the organization and the processes and the systems as we have gone through hypergrowth as a company and taken an industry-leading position. And in the past, have been fortunate to have had a pretty varied experience, having worked at and built up globally distributed teams, working on turnaround, teaming up with private equity, and as well as taking on leadership roles at early stage startups. So hopefully get to share some of the learnings, both the failures and the mistakes from my experience. So to get started, the main topic that we're here to talk about today is scaling high growth organizations. But before we get to scaling, I wanted to talk a little bit about disruption, because it tends to come before scaling. And it's a pretty exciting thing in itself. I wanted to kind of share some of the common themes I have seen of disruptive companies. And I thought we would start with that. So a couple of the companies I tried to draw examples from Uber and Airbnb, just as someone who's kind of studied the hypergrowth that these companies have gone through, and same with our experience with Sunrun, some of the parallels about what were the common themes with disruption. One of the first things that I've noticed is these kind of disruptive companies, they tend to create a new market. Disruption doesn't need to come in the form of creating a new market, but they often tend to come in the form of creating a new market. I mean, let's take Uber as an example. Uber just did not build a more efficient Hertz rental or a national car rental company. They started off as a limousine to a cab, almost in a parallel market. And then now today, I don't remember the last time I actually rented a car. I just take Uber or Lyft wherever I go. And that's kind of what makes it very interesting, because these companies tend to start in parallel markets that the incumbent companies or the industries just don't see them coming. iTunes is another great example where it disrupted so many different industries, but initially it seemed as it was just a music player. The second theme that we've noticed with disruptive companies is they not only bring a new product to market, they tend to bring a new product to market and package it as a business model that's different than the traditional business model. If you take enterprise software, that was always sold as a major infrastructure initiative, versus then came software as a service, the sharing economy, or the subscription economy. All these new product innovations that came to market, they also understood what the consumer needs were and able to package that value proposition in a different business model. I mean, at Sunrun, for example, traditionally, clean energy was a massive investment. If as a consumer, you would need to spend $50,000, $60,000 to put a solar panels on your roof, at least in the US, to cover the whole home. And we turned that into a zero down, $200 a month subscription model, like an energy as a service. And that pairing that some of these other companies have done with business model is an interesting observation. Then the third one is these companies do tend to bring a low-cost alternative to the market. While the price point may not start off as a low cost, because before they achieve scale, they don't have low cost, but even if you look at SaaS by design, instead of spending millions of dollars in investment in a company, just can really get going by signing up for a few $100 or a $10,000 licensing fee, depending on the size of the company. And the reason they're able to do that is because these companies, they do come with more efficient operations at lower cost. And that also enables them to disrupt incumbent companies that tend to get bloated over time with adding on more features and infrastructure and their own operations. And finally, we can't discount the value of offering consumer choice. I mean, before Airbnb, nobody thought there was an alternative to hotels, and here comes, they have tapped into by giving consumer, hey, now you have a choice. You can stay at an Airbnb or you can stay at a hotel. You can take an Uber or you can take a cab. For us, you can get energy from the grid that's from coal, or you can get clean energy right from your roof. Consumer choice and enabling consumer choice is a very powerful motivator and a powerful force in driving disruption. I'll transition a little bit because I'll be drawing a lot of my examples from our company Sunrun. I just have one slide on it, just to get us grounded and do a little bit of an industry spotlight on US residential solar, particularly in companies like Germany, India, and some of the other companies. Solar has had tremendous adoption, but it looks a little bit different in the US. I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. And the nature of the disruption 10 years ago, this just was not a viable solution for consumers. Yes, it was good for the environment, but consumers are not just motivated by what's good. They like to have a savings opportunity. And so Sunrun actually pioneered the solar as a service business model in the US. We created the market, we created a new business model, and we gave consumers a choice. And today, it operates in 18 states and fast growing, has over $3 billion in finance assets with all the tier one investors. And then both the challenge and the opportunity for the last couple of years that I've been here, actually I just hit my 4-year anniversary last week, has been, it's a platform play because we have a whole direct business that goes to market under our brand, but we also have a platform business that completely enables the long tail to operate their business end to end. So we have built software for pretty much anything and everything you can think of, from automated design tools, pricing, scheduling, operations, point of sale. I mean, there isn't anything we haven't built software for. And we now bring that whole software platform, enabling other solar players that want to succeed. They operate on our platform. And the challenge for us right now is how can we continue to drive operational efficiency, wring out all the inefficiencies in the business, and drive towards profitable growth. So I'll be drawing a lot of examples from that. So just wanted to you to have a little bit of that background about the U.S. residential solar industry. And it's another interesting point of view here is that while us and some of our competitors, our biggest competitor is and was Solar City, that just got acquired by Tesla, making us the largest independent player. All of the top solar companies combined have only 3% market share, and the rest 97% is untapped. So while it seems like we have achieved billions of dollars and a lot of exciting things, we're really at sprint 1 and just getting started. So now moving on to our topic for the day, which is scaling. And we talk about scaling as in we say, hey, we need to scale the business. But of course, I mean, scaling the business means building up sales teams, hiring, setting up channels, and all of that. But I think what we really mean, or really we should mean when we say scaling the business, is really, are we able to scale innovation? Because when you start a company or a product, you're innovative by design. I mean, you're doing something new. I mean, hopefully that's why you have a startup and you're trying to do something exciting, or you're a product manager and you're building a really cool product. But all those things, as you grow, the challenge becomes how do you kind of stay rooted in that entrepreneurial spirit, the disruptive nature of it, and that fast decision making, and that everybody is working in unison. So those are the things that get lost as a company scales, and that's really the innovative spirit. So we'll talk a little bit about today, how do you stay true to that, both in your product and your organization. All right. And related to that, I think one of my favorite quotes from a professor at Stanford, William Barnett, who does, and Stanford is a school that particularly having that right in our backyard, and I think good a third or half of our leadership team comes from there. The leader's job is to know the future, is not to know the future, but to design systems to discover it. The truth is, and even Steve Jobs in his commencement address at Stanford had said that we can only connect the dots looking backward. I mean, we don't really know the future. We make a lot of assumptions, and we hope we get it right. But really, the whole idea is to design systems. And here, systems means the whole institutional system, like the organization, the process, the product, all of it is really the systems. Because the best thing we can do is design systems to discover that future. And I think that that really resonated with me, and I wanted to share that with you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So jumping in, now we'll be talking a little bit about what are some of the pillars of, or the foundational things that you can do to build a company through scale, and what do you want to keep your eyes on. And the first topic is true customer obsession, and it's probably the one that's going to sound the most simple, and it's what I found is possibly the hardest. And of all the things we'll talk about today that really build a foundation for scale, this one you will need as much on day one as you will on year 5. And more than ever on year 20, should the company survive and not get disrupted themselves, because the disruptive companies tend to get disrupted themselves. And really, the true customer obsession, it can mean many things. And at a later stage of the company is, of course, having a great customer experience. But what I am talking about here today, or what I want to talk about, is your ability to truly understand your customer. And I don't know what your product management methodologies each of you use, but defining the 3, and if you're maybe Facebook, maybe less than 10, maybe 9 personas, that's critical to defining what is your product, what is your value proposition, and in the early stages, getting to that product market fit. Because unless you really know your customers, how can you truly even build a product? How can you even define a value proposition? And really, it means also knowing which customer segment you don't want to serve. I mean, imagine a company like Facebook that has so many users. I mean, if they really listen, they probably listen to almost or as much of their customer base as they can, but they don't really act on each and many of them. They act on their insights and what they decide on. But some of them, you just say, or like the LinkedIn Lion, where the LinkedIn founder says, you know, that's an interesting segment, that's a fast-growing early adopter, but that's not really the base that we want to primarily serve. So knowing who you don't want to serve is also a valuable insight that you get by truly understanding with your customer. And you get this deep understanding by getting directly with your customer and your user base, spending time with them, being in their native environment, and that's how you kind of really live and think the life of your customer. And as Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn said, if you really want your company to truly scale, you do the things that don't scale, because it seems initially, when I have 1 million or 1 billion users, how am I going to go spend time with each and every one of them? Well, you do that when you have 25 people, when you have 50, and you make sure that you build up the muscles and the personas and the deep insights, because even when you have 1 billion users and you are trying to put out that one feature that you're really not sure about, you want to make sure that you're going back to your drawing that personas that you had created and your deep insights that you had about your customer. So if you don't take away anything from this webinar, I hope you take the spirit and the value of true customer obsession. The next thing we wanted to talk about today is about making fast decisions and allowing mistakes. Often, particularly at the early stage of a startup or an early stage of a company, this one is actually not really a problem. And I almost envy and I miss those days when, the founder and a couple of the leaders and the engineers and the designer, and they can just get together and say, hey, let's just do it. I mean, decisions come fast. And entrepreneurs are perfectly comfortable making decisions with incomplete information. And that's not just by choice. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you don't have the full information, and it's just a reality. But it's actually super valuable, and often that gets lost as a company grows. And there are too many obstacles or too many flows that are created to decision making. And if you're always waiting for that 80 or 90, 100% information never exists. Even if you're waiting for 80, 90, you're just going to be too slow, and the market's going to move on you. And also what I like to do at Sunrun when I set out our roadmap, and really the product managers do, and when I review it, I always make sure that we have 2 to 3 bets. I mean, we have the sure thing kind of a roadmap. Of course, it's a very dynamic roadmap, but the sure thing of what we want to move the needle on. But I always make sure that we're still making 2 to 3 bets on the unknown, really operating in that 20%, because some of the genius ideas actually come from exploring that unknown. So it's important to kind of balance that fast decision, do the best you can with the 60, 70% information you have, act on it, learn fast, fail fast, but at the same time, keep your eyes on that rest 20%, and some of the good things actually kind of come right out of that. All right. Moving on to more the organizational aspects of scaling, I wanted to talk a little bit about mission focus. Before I talk about mission focus, I must say the key word here is focus, and I went back and underlined it. And just to be clear, and just so this doesn't come across as cliche, most companies have mission statements. But it's only the great ones live it, and I'm talking about the great ones here. Even Enron had a mission statement about ethics plastered all over their walls. So clearly the objective of this slide is not to have a mission. The objective is, can you run your organization that stays true to your mission? Do you get to live it? And some of these companies, just because I have friends in all of these companies, and a few others in the Valley area, and I'm a little bit too familiar with how these companies work, one thing you got to say is they are very true to their mission, and the decisions that they make are always reflective. And I know I'll speak for our company. Every day we reflect on the why we do it. I mean, every discussion we actually start by, hey, we're here to create a planet run by the sun. And it's not just a rah-rah. I mean, we do it because it constantly, the ability to constantly look at the bigger picture about why we're here and what are we trying to do, it actually helps us not get too bogged down by the day-to-day and keep our eye on the bigger picture and what matters in the long run. So it's actually, while it seems very high level and wishy-washy, it's the very thing that can ground us in a good way, keep us grounded, and help make the right decision for the future. And that's what I mean by having a mission focus. The next thing, which is very closely tied to it, is culture. And again, culture is something that is often ignored. Recently, I was grabbing a cup of tea here with one of my ex-colleagues who was actually a VP of talent at Facebook before she became a VP of talent at Sunrun, and she kind of helped us through the early few years of growth. So I was catching up with her, and she asked me, so hi, Asif, how has it been scaling Sunrun, and what do you think was some of your big takeaways? And as I was reflecting with her, this was just a few weeks ago, I remember that really the fact that we put in the foundational blocks of a strong culture in the early phases of our growth was probably the most critical thing. I don't know if we realized it then, that how valuable it was going to be in the long run. And most organizations try to create a culture as an afterthought. They're like, oh, we're big enough, we need to have a culture. CEOs and the executive team comes up with a culture, we make posters and you communicate it down. Versus at Sunrun, we created the culture at the very beginning. And I actually put our values that we have at Sunrun: be inventive, be adaptable, be customer obsessed, be real, and BYOV is actually bring your own value. And you will often, if you're here, and I hope to meet some of you in person one day, if you're here in our corridors or in a meeting, in any given day, you will hear us using that language. When we're stuck with a difficult problem, we'll say, hey, let's be inventive here. Or when we're delivering an uncomfortable truth to our executive team, we say, being real, this is the way I see it. And when you have your most talented people are operating to these values and intellectual clarity and honesty, great things happen. And it has really become our DNA. It has really become our culture. And particularly bring your own value, that means we celebrate everybody. We celebrate the new perspective and different experience. It's different from how we do things here. And that's why we welcome everybody that is kind of bringing their own value to the organization, and we celebrate that. And that also has become very much as part of our DNA, and has been critical to our success as a company as we have gone through the hypergrowth. And again, I don't mean culture as in the top level stuff, just like in the mission. I mean the culture as in the real lead, what you live it, how you act, what you reward, the language you use, and all of that. That's really the DNA of the company. Moving forward, is critical is talent. When you are small and you're a startup, in many ways hiring is tough because you don't have much to offer other than your big pitch as an entrepreneur. But interestingly enough, you do get the right people because you get entrepreneurial, smart people who believe in you and your mission and want to change the world. So while it's hard because you can't give them big salaries and all of that, you get to hire you get to attract the right people. But when you're scaling, it's different because when you're scaling, and very recently I was hiring a very senior director and up level in my organization, and one of the top contenders had just scaled one of the top startups. You'd all know the name, and a very successful company. And the only reason we chose someone else was because it was clear that he was more of a mercenary approach of, hey, I've done it and I'm just going to do it for again, which is nice because you definitely want that. But it wasn't so clear that he was really bought into our mission and to our culture, that mindset. So it's important. You're going to need people who have done it before, no doubt about it. But you need to also make sure that they're bought into your mission, because otherwise it can have a very toxic effect and you lose the very essence of what got you here. So that's something that I encourage. And we're very careful. We take our time with our hiring, and each and every hire, no matter what level of the organization, we always make sure that this is a good fit, that person is bought into our mission and is going to be a good addition to our culture while bringing their own value. All right. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about communication. This is an area where, when you're small, you're so focused, but as we grow, it feels there are infinite more possibilities and opportunities because you have a lot of money in the bank and you can do many things, so you can definitely afford it. But what happens to that is that 98% are distractions. And finding the right ones to focus your entire organization's resource is extremely challenging. How do you find that? And the way you get to focus your organization and align to the few things that matter is when you do pick those few things that matter, you communicate. And also even in picking what those right things are. Just to step back a little bit, when we talk about building world-class teams, we always talk about, hey, make sure you're communicating down. But when growing fast, I found communicating up and across is just as, or if not more important, because you want to make sure that everybody is making decisions and working out of the same set of deep insights. Because if you are a product manager and you have this very clear understanding of your product, it's so critical that you're communicating that across to your sales leader, to your marketing leader that are doing the positioning, to your executive team, to your CEO, to that deep insight, because you have it, you're the one that's closest to the product. So really communicate up, communicate down and across, and keep doing it. And I have never found anything to be more important than rallying the whole organization, because otherwise what happens is, remember that 95% opportunities I talked about, the whole organization is pursuing that 95%. And the leadership team might have the 5 in their head, or the product manager has a 5 in their head, and everybody is moving on the rest 95. You want to focus everybody, and the only way you can get everybody on the same page on your strategy or your insights is really communicate. And then again, and this being a product management focused audience, I'm sure you also know just rallying, communicating your product vision and getting everybody aligned. I mean, the role of a product manager is also fundamentally to communicate as much as possible. The next, I want to talk a little bit about making decisions based on data, and that's something that we have found to be very useful, and talk a little bit about our experience there. And that maniacal focus on making sure that you are using data to drive insights and decisions. And at our company, we strive to measure everything, including which corner of our retail partner property leads to higher consumer traffic and conversion. I mean, we literally measured it down to a floor plan at a retail property, and that's the kind of data that we are just talking about, and that hasn't always been the case. I mean, we are very fortunate to kind of have that discipline now. And at the beginning, we could get away with a lot of qualitative judgment, but now we just can't afford to do that anymore. And it's not really just about measuring; it's about making decisions based on those insights. And the other cool thing is we've made that exact same data very widely accessible to everyone. Because, you know, if only few people have the data and each of them has their own version of Excel spreadsheet that's telling them something, that's not really going to be the drive outcome. So every executive meeting we have our screens up, and instead of presentations, there are often just data and analysis. So we are all looking at the exact same set of data, and then we can have a debate and draw our own insights about on how to interpret the data. I mean, there is still a very human element to it, but at least you're starting from the exact same source of data, and you are looking at it, and it's very accessible. It's accessible on my phone. I could literally pull up any statistics about our conversion, to how our product is doing, to how our sales channel is doing, down to a rep, to an organization, to a channel. I can literally pull that up on our phone just like that. And, you know, when you are small, this kind of data helps you make a lot of qualitative judgments. I mean, even today, in many ways, we are still making qualitative judgments based on the data, because compared to some other companies like Amazon, we're small. But imagine Amazon or Facebook with millions or billions of users, where now with that data, you can have some serious quantitative significance. So the amount of qualitative judgment you have to apply shrinks a little bit, and the quantitative significance, because it's just that much, it has statistical significance for those companies. So moving on from data, I want to talk next about building a platform. And this, I realize, is not relevant. This is not something that works for everybody. It's like some of the mission and culture and platform, but it worked for us, so I thought I should talk about it. And just so we are all on the same page, what we're talking about platform is think Salesforce, think iTunes, that enables whole new industries or enables others. So it's not just fulfilling your sole focus goal or value proposition. The value proposition itself is to enable others to fulfill the value proposition of their customers. So when you're building a platform, everything just becomes more complicated. It becomes more complicated, but it also fuels growth in a very interesting and excited ways. So for us, what we had done, our software platform is BrightPath, and it really enabled us to scale our partner ecosystem and go to market. From the very beginning, we realized that we'd have to build true automation and really exciting and innovative software for everything. Because if we did everything the old school grid way, clean energy would not be $200 or $150 a month. It would be thousands of dollars. So we needed to really reinvent all of it and really extract margin from everything and extract savings in everything. And what we did from the very beginning, we built the entire stack as a platform. And that enabled us not to serve and scale our direct business, but it enabled the whole industry, and it created a high level of stickiness with our partner ecosystem. So there were all these solar companies that were operating there under their own brand. They would design their solar system with our system, and they would price it with our system, or they would build it with our system, or they would finance it with our system, and all of that they would run there on our CRM, and all of that was very valuable. But the challenge is, wow, not only do you have multiple customers, now you have multiple businesses, and they have their own customers. So how do you keep it lean? Because that becomes a real challenge, and not because platforms can become because you want it to be super nimble, you want it to be flexible, but you also don't want it to get heavy in terms of features. So that has been a very complex challenge for us, but at the same time has really fueled our growth and really fueled our business by enabling other businesses. Moving on from platform is to the most hated word, at least in the Silicon Valley, is process. Because I'm sure when I talk about process, what comes to people's mind is kind of what's in this picture. It's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of slowdown. And truth is, in most companies, that's how process looks like. And so no wonder it's a disliked word. But to be real, taking one of our values is it's impossible to scale without process. And the problem is not process, but the problem is that we tend to create processes that look like that. So a definition that I try to instill in our organization or in companies that I've worked at is the role of a process is something that simplifies, and that's how you gut check that you have that process down. So if you're adding process and it's making things more complicated, you probably have the wrong process. So the sole purpose of the process should be, yes, it's put in places mechanisms so you can reproduce success, you can align an organization, you can have repeat success, but it's extremely important that it's driving productivity and speed. And really one that is constantly simplified. So that's why you have to regularly, and we always say, in fact, we never say we've always done it this way, and that's how we have done it. We're constantly willing to clean slate and regularly evaluate and evolve our processes to make sure this is how we do product management, this is how we do sales, this is our blueprint for sales, this is our product management playbook, this is how we do operation. Everything is well understood and aligned, but so everybody's mind is not, because what you don't want is all your smart people trying to figure out at every step out of the way, trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, some of the stuff that just works just needs to keep going, and what you want to do is save your brain capacity to do the more creative things. I don't know if it's true or not. I recently read an article about why does Mark Zuckerberg wear the same thing or Steve Jobs wear the same thing? And there is a little bit of a study that said that because creative people, all the mundane things by doing the same thing over and again, they don't use any one of their creative power to focus on things that they don't think matters, like what you wear. So they can save their creative ideas and thought process on truly what matters. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought that was a pretty interesting article. So you can take that same philosophy towards process. Save your brain power for the things that matter. Don't use it to always remember what your next step is. So those are some of the foundational things, while simple, that I have found to be the most critical in really building the foundations of scale. But then you could ask, okay, but how do you know these are the right things? And well, the way I know is I have seen, fortunately, I guess, what happens when you overlook these foundation elements. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit of the story of what I have seen when you don't build all the things that we talked about today. And this I'll draw from my experience about
আমার সব লগ ইন করতে হবে না যা তুমি বললে চলে গেল এটা তো
yeah, sorry.
বলো না কিছু
I think someone needs to put themselves on mute.
15 মিনিট দাঁড়িয়ে যাও আবার চলে গেল
All right, I'll continue. If I may ask, guys, if you're listening, if you could please put your phone on mute. Thanks. And I wanted to share my experience for my doing a turnaround, teaming up with a private equity, because when we kind of came in to that organization, we observed a systematic failure at a global organization at a scale that I've never seen before. I mean, it was a fast-growing company, one of the leaders in its space, one of the top 3 in its space globally, doing large-scale commercial and defense contracts, and yet there were projects that were late by 7 years. They were all 3 R&D divisions were kind of working on their own mission. There was not really a communication framework. Projects were prioritized in their own way, so there was not really a focus. Culture was not something we really talked about. The mission was again, everybody was just doing their own thing. I mean, and yet it was growing. I mean, it was clearly successful, but it hit a ceiling of both in terms of getting alignment in the organization, prioritizing, focusing, and execution, and really having the process of doing things in a disciplined and consistent manner. So when we teamed up with a private equity and did a turnaround that leading to a sale at a higher valuation, which is what private equity does, that's what we really put in place from the very beginning. We attacked it at the core, like, hey, why are we here? What is the culture? How do the different global organizations communicate? How do you cross-prioritize? How do you build? What's your sales process? I mean, we literally went in and put in all these foundational things. There was no magical strategy that we applied. Actually, I mean, there were some interesting strategy we applied in terms of, do we focus on defense? Do we focus on commercial? Do we focus on what market segments? We did the segmentation and all of that, no doubt. But that actually came later, or that was definitely done in parallel. I remember the first whole year was putting in just place all the things that we talked about, just because the company didn't put in place some of the foundational things. And that's great, because now once we were able to do that, the value of the whole organization, the output of the organization definitely magnified. And finally, and then I'll open it up for questions, wanted to share our product management playbook, which is actually quite simple, but I hope you can draw value from it. All our product managers, director of products, the whole organization kind of operate this way. And there were some key, I thought it was we found it to be quite valuable. So So the first one is ideation. The no-brainer there. We try to be as open to new ideas as possible. We always say new ideas can come from anywhere in the organization. And we have tried to make it as easy as possible for ideas to come from customers, from our investors, from our leadership team, from literally anybody. So like the whole forum, and it's well understood in the organization how ideas come forward. Because what you don't want and what we didn't want was to make sure was that, hey, there is no clear pathway for the ideas to come into our product management organization. And what we encourage people is when they bring their ideas is, bring us the problems. And often people do bring in solutions. That's human nature, but that's the role of product manager. I coach my product managers. Initially, they used to say, hey, why are you bringing me solutions, bring me problems? But I coach them to that, hey, it's our role to unwrap it and go to the root of the problem. But we welcome people to bring in ideas. And then the biggest thing that we have put in place in our product management is our discovery process, because we always had high velocity. We went from monthly releases to weekly releases. Now with continuous delivery, we can do actually releases multiple times a day. That's how our release process is so sophisticated right now with CI/CD. But really, that's just work. But how do you really make sure that you're solving the problem? And that kind of goes back to engaging the customer early on, creating a mood board, creating the personas of the consumers, creating the sketches, creating live mockups. We use an app called Envision, and going back to the customer with clickable mockups. Hey, is this solving your problem? Before writing a single line of code, because it's not about writing code. It's not about shipping code. It's about solving a problem, and the only way you're going to solve the problem is if you understand the problem. Just to give you a quick idea, when we were launching our point-of-sale apps, one of the user base for our point-of-sale app is actually our door-to-door business for solar. It's actually a big deal, which is surprising in its own way. And I spent a whole day at 100-degree weather, canvassing and knocking on people's door and trying to sell solar, because I just wanted that appreciation and the pain, both from the consumer who gets their door knocked to the sales rep who has the door slammed on them 20 times, before somebody opens their door or is willing to talk. Like, how do you have that empathy and that deep understanding before envisioning a purchase experience or a sales experience for the sales rep, or a purchase experience for the consumer into an app? And that's what I mean by that constant discovery. And then for building, the biggest thing that we found that had the biggest impact was we used to be organized by front-end engineer, back-end engineer, CRM engineering, QA teams, PM teams, and now what we have done is created product teams, and each product team has a product manager, a UX designer, multiple Java front-end engineers, back-end engineers, DevOps, CRM engineering, QA automation, and that's the unit and stakeholders identified. And that unit, and we have like 10 of these units running in parallel, they have their own destiny, they have their own mission, they have their own problem-solving abilities. And that takes away so much of the inter-organizational or cross-functional friction and the fact that they are able to operate as a unit. And then this part I'm sure won't come as a surprise. We launch impactful MVPs, we fail fast, we make quick iterations, and we make sure we carve out time. We don't launch and then jump into another project. That wasn't always the case. We always make sure, and the product team structure lends itself really well, because the product team is it's a persistent entity, and they will continue to solve that part of the problem. So one product team could be always focused on the consumer app. That problem never goes away. You're always trying to make that better and constantly iterating. And we measure. There was a time when we didn't have it, but now we have built in analytics more and more into our application, so we can drive insights to drive the product decisions, and make sure that we allow failures and no confirmation bias, because often in data you see what you want to see. So we always remind ourselves to really look at the data, what it's really telling us. So it's a very basic kind of product management playbook, but particularly the discovery aspect of it, the product team, those two I would say are the things that have had the biggest impact in our product management process and organization. And that's it. And wanted to thank you again for listening. and I wanted to open it up to questions.
Great, Asif. That was very, very good and a lot of good advice. We have a lot of questions that have come in, so it definitely resonated with people in terms of the topics that you went through. And as you mentioned, all these things sound very simple, but they are very hard to do. So let me take a few questions that have come in. One of the things that seems to be a common thread here is that these aspects of growth that you went through, mission, culture, communication, process, typically they tend to be defined by executives, by senior management in the organization. So as product managers or engineering people, depending upon where we sit in the organization today, what can we do, based upon where we are in the organization? Because not everybody has a chance to be part of this group that's defining the mission and the culture.
No, okay, great. I think I understand what you're saying. Well, thank you very much for the question. And this is something that I'm actually quite passionate about that topic, because I get that question elsewhere as well. And I have actually a very different maybe take on it. I fundamentally believe that if mission and culture is defined top down, it doesn't work. Because that's what I was hoping to impress upon is culture is how you live it. And we as product managers, we as individuals, a culture that is defined at the top, or if we think of a culture as something that's defined as the top, that's, to my analogy, the poster on the wall. But we as product managers, are we looking at the data? Are we communicating? Are we engaging the customers? Are we being customer obsessive, having true customer obsession? We as engineers, PMs, we are the ones who gets to live it, and that's where true culture is built. So I really encourage people to take ownership of mission and culture to every individual, because I think that's where it starts and that's where it propagates through the organization. And even focusing on data, all of these can be practiced at the individual level. And I truly believe that, and we have built a culture around exactly that, where that's where it happens and not really comes top down.
Great. There are a few questions, Asif, here around the topic of simplicity and complexity. So let me kind of rephrase to cover all of them. We talked about scale and getting to large numbers through processes and systems and all of that. But as we do that, the team gets bigger. It's a distributed global organization. The product starts becoming bloated to meet the needs of different customers. The go-to-market and the partners that you need to reach the market, all of that adds complexity. So how do we avoid this complexity as we scale our business?
Sure. I think, I wish there was an easy answer to that one. Yeah. But it's a very, very valid question. Thank you for asking. I'll talk a little bit about what I have seen, and I think talk a little bit about having talked to some of the friends at the Facebooks of the world as well, because they operate at a whole new scale, right? Mm-hmm. So the way we have done it here is that we always challenge the status quo, and every time we are adding something new, we actually take a step back and look at the whole picture. So when we are adding a channel to market, we, of course, vet it on its own that, okay, great, we're going to add an integrated channel to market or a retail channel to market. And then we literally, in that same conversation, half an hour in, we've vetted it all, or 10 hours in, whatever it is. But the second half is, okay, great, what does it mean for the other channels? And if this is truly a better channel, where does it stack up in on all our channels, and should we drop a channel? And similarly, the way, even when I've done product, it's the same thing, is when we're adding a feature, we say, okay, great, it's a super valuable feature. Can we also look at what is not valuable? And product managers, we are always so focused on adding features, but we should literally be spending the other half of the time, maybe something should be taken out. I mean, the amount of decision that went into when Instagram changed their aspect ratio, or Facebook moved from the home, your profile page view to the newsfeed view, actually their product felt lighter, it felt simpler. And the reason they did that because they deprioritized other views. They didn't also focus on your homepage and your newsfeed, all your photos. They made the photos bigger. They shrunk the right panel because as they were emphasizing one thing, they were de-emphasizing other things. And that's how you keep that good balance, both whether it's your consumer or as an organization, and constantly being willing to reflect and see, hey, and can we clean slate it here, and based on the information that we have. So that's something that's, I think, very key. That discipline or that muscle doesn't really exist, but in most companies, but true great product management, like at Amazon's and Facebook's of the world, that discipline is if you talk to their product managers, is very much in their DNA.
Great. So here's an interesting question, Asif. As we are going through this, journey from disruption to scale, and going from innovation to scale, is there a right time that a startup has to know that it's now time to start scaling? Is there a time factor involved there? How does a startup know that it's now the time to start scaling?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it also depends on the type of product that you have, because if you're scaling a mobile app with, Instagram today still operates as a pretty good entity in itself, even within Facebook, and they are so brilliant, and they just operate as just a few people, and they have never really adopted some of the other scale things, if you will, from an organization point of view. At the same time, in their blog, they were talking a little bit about when their servers started crashing, and they realized, oh boy, we've hit scale, maybe not organizational scale, but they hit a technical level of scale. I don't know, honestly, whether I have a very good answer about when you truly know, but I guess as I think about let me sit on that for a second, but all I will encourage is some of the foundational things like true customer obsession, being focused on data and insights, making sure you have a good culture, making sure that you're communicating, whether it's with your customers or to your executive, all those things. It's better if you just start at the beginning and not wait for that event that when scale happens, because truly what's going to happen is scale is going to happen, and then when you are going to try and go back and build those muscles, and that's when most organizations fail. So that's why when it is 5 people a day, you can't go talk to all your customers. You can communicate, you can hire the right people, and just build some of those things in your DNA, and then scale is not going to feel like one big painful event. You're going to welcome it because you have the very foundation to build it. I know it's a little bit of a roundabout answer, but all I'm saying is it's a way to ease into scale and not really have it turn it into a big event. The only reason it becomes a big event that, oh, we have scale today, is because we don't ease ourselves into it.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that is, like you mentioned, the maniacal focus on measuring the data and the metrics, and at some point when you start tracking those metrics over time, you realize that there is a certain shift happening in those metrics, and those metrics, maybe that's a good way to understand where the business is going and the opportunity to scale 10x beyond that.
Yeah, agreed. That's a good point.
Yeah, and then I think we'll have time for one question here, which I thought this is a good question. As we go from startup to scale up, and there is a whole culture of accepting failure, experimentation when we are in the startup phase. But as we get into the scaling phase, where it's all about repeated and consistent execution, there's not a lot of the focus on performance and metrics and making sure that we are hitting the numbers and hitting the milestones. There's not a lot of room for failure. So how do we maintain that culture of innovation and acceptance of failure as we scale?
I think you just carve it out. That's the way you do it is you just make 2 to 3 bets and drive consistency on everything else. I mean, if you read Jeff Bezos' shareholder letter, I think he also tackles it in a very, very, very proper way, where you have to be focused on performance, right? And that's your role in the organization as a leader. But at the same time, be always open to make it 2 to 3 bets and call it a bet. Because I remember when I was taking our organization through our roadmap literally a couple of months ago, I said, hey, we're going to drive performance. here. We're going to drive sales here. We're going to drive operations here. That's your 90%, and everybody's great. Let me tell you, we're also making these 2 to 3 bets. I don't know if this will pan out. If it does, the returns are going to be 10 times more than the rest 90%. If it doesn't, you still have the 90%. So being able to use that language and educating the organization that that's what they are bets, and we need to make it. And I think that kind of framing can get executives comfortable because they can also take satisfaction in that 80% consistency and discipline.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Asif, thanks a lot for the webinar and answering these questions. I want to thank everyone for sharing all these questions as well. We couldn't get to every single question, but we'll have these questions on the LinkedIn group, and we'll request Asif to take a look at these questions and give us his insights. So once again, thanks a lot for taking the time to attend this webinar. Padmaja, I want to turn this back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rahul. Asif, thank you on behalf of the product community for sharing your insights this evening with us, your morning, I know. Just want to leave the audience with a few notes. We have winners to announce for the webinar tonight. The book goes to Avi Sharma for his insightful question previously. We also had a few folks ask questions on the LinkedIn group. Iqbal Thakur and Manjunath, you both will get discount coupons to the Product Management Fundamentals e-learning course. We have a few more exciting webinars coming up. On May 25th, we are going to be listening to Krishnan Nair, Director of Product Management at Bill.com, who's going to be talking about working with the value chain, a product manager's journey. On June 20th, next month, we have Bill Gordon, who was previously a senior executive in charge of consumer products over at Dell, speaking about starting new businesses and creating product innovation in large enterprises. So do join us for those. We also have a Day in the Life seminar coming up in Pune in the first week of June. So do watch the space, www.productleadership.com, our website, and also engage with us on our social media handles. We look forward to engaging with all of you. Thank you, good night, and good day from wherever you're logging in.